So the 9th edition points changes are here. Let's talk about what this means for the Guard, and today we'll be focusing on those 5-point infantry squads and the rest of the Guard infantry and characters. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're going to be covering the chapter approved points changes for Guard and many other factions. In this video I thought we'd start by talking through every single foot and infantry option that the Guard have to offer. My plan is to do this video today, which will mainly cover the troops, elites and HQ slots, and then talk about all of the Guard motor pool in a following video tomorrow. In 9th edition, as we know, everything's been going up a little bit in points, but in terms of whether or not things have been nerfed or buffed, it really depends on the percentage points change. That's the best number in my mind to compare exactly how much you can get of a unit for a certain amount of points. With that in mind, we'll look at all the infantry and character units, including some common pieces of war gear. We'll start with the troops' choices and their special and heavy weapons, move on to all of the Guard characters, including the special characters, and then talk about all of the other infantry options in the codex from the elite and heavy support section. Let's jump straight into it. So we'll start with the Guard troops then, and I'll be honest, it's not amazing news for the standard infantry squad, though it could have been worse. Going from 4 points to 5 points will be a 25% points increase, which is above the vast majority of the other things in the game at the moment. Frankly, I'm just glad that they didn't put it up to 6 points as Chaos Cultists got, because I think that would really make Foot Guard completely unplayable. The design philosophy in 9th edition seems to be that no model is less than 5 points, even things like Lowly Gretchen are 5 points now, so I'm pretty glad that we haven't got even more than 5. As it is though, I think that this will shift the balance of Guard lists just that little bit more. Infantry squads weren't particularly efficient damage dealers already, though they are decently durable and very mobile point for point, and I think going up to 5 points will now mean that it's more likely that you'll see a contingent of infantry in a list, but not entire Foot Guard armies so much. I think they'll still be very usable, they're great screens, and they have excellent mobility with move, and if you actually look at some of the squads which actually have gear attached, then they haven't gone up quite as much as before. Plasma guns dropped from 7 points to 5 points surprisingly, so a plasma gun infantry squad has actually only risen to 55 points from 47, so that's a 17% increase, which is a bit more in line with the other things that went up. Last Cannon stayed the same points, and comparatively having the same rise on more expensive squads mean that if you were running heavy or special weapons with them, in general it's not quite as bad a deal. I'm sure we can talk through the various infantry options in more detail at a later date. I was hoping that they might use this opportunity to differentiate conscripts from standard infantry, but that seems not to be the case. Now you're paying a premium for them, I do think that there's even less reason to take conscripts, particularly with all the nerfs to large units in 9th. For our core troops, I think that infantry are still going to be the go-to over conscripts, and perhaps even more so. For Scion squads, they've jumped from 7 points to 9 points for your individual Scion with a hotshot lasgun. In terms of mass hotshots, this is a bit of a blow. They've jumped 28% in points, so again, pretty much a nerf compared with the rest of the field throughout Warhammer 40k. Definitely don't think they needed it myself, they weren't particularly overpowered or anything, but I think this is going to relegate them to a bit more of a niche role, where you either pay a premium for objective capping, or give them a whole bunch of special weapons and have them drop down. The special weapons changes have been a lot more kind to squads of Scions that were using specials in them already. On Ballistic Skill 3 platforms, plasma guns and melter guns are both 10 points now, so a Scion squad with those loadouts will now cost you 65. And percentage increase wise, this is far better, particularly the melter gun loadout, which has gone up just 3%, and this is going to be a relative buff compared with the rest of the field, which has largely gone up more. If you were using hotshot volley guns, then they don't seem to have got worse if you were using them en masse in Scion armies. They're now 5 points, so the relative percentage increase is better. If we turn our attention to the heavies and special weapons that you could put in infantry squads, Flamers dropped from 6 to 5, maybe a little bit more viable now. Those very cheap bolters went up from 1 point to 2 points, making them a bit more of a decision and less of an auto-include, but I think I would still be tempted myself. As we said, melter guns saw some of the greatest improvement, dropping 10 points or 14 points depending on the platform, to 5 points on a ballistic skill 4+, or 10 points on a ballistic skill 3+. They're now exactly the same as plasma guns on the same points costs, so there is going to be a lot more of a trade-off between the two now. The melter guns will generally do better against the heaviest armour, though less good against elite infantry, and of course don't try and kill you if you try and overcharge. In any case, both plasma and melter got a decent buff from this update. I wish I could say the same for grenade launchers, but going up from 3 points to 5 points really means that I just don't think they're worth it anymore again. The blast rules might help them out a little bit on their frag grenade modes, but unless you know that you're playing against hordes of 11 plus infantry, I just don't think that I'd bother taking them. In the heavy weapons section, the mortars went up from 9 points to 10 points, but again did gain the blast special rule, so still decently usable I think. Heavy bolters took a nerf as well from 8 points to 10 points on infantry, though they've gone up even more on vehicles. I don't really think that they needed a nerf myself, they weren't commonly taken in any sort of competitive list. Missile launchers have jumped up from 10 points to 15 points, possibly due to the frag mode gain the blast rule. Honestly, I think that these are a lot less attractive now with that big points bump, and as we said, the hotshot volley gun drops 2 points down to 5. For whatever reason, Games Workshop wants to try and make all points cost multiples of 5 or 10 wherever possible. I'm really not sure it was particularly well needed. I think we have lost some granularity because of that. We have weird situations where grenade launchers and plasma guns are priced exactly the same, despite one of them being vastly superior. In terms of rules that were unchanged, sniper rifles are still 2 points, las cannons are still 15 on infantry, and autocannons are still 10. For heavy weapons in infantry squads, I'd generally be looking at las cannons or autocannons, and for special weapons I'd be choosing plasma or melter at the moment. Moving on to some HQ choices now. A lot of the units have gone up around about 5 points now. Company commanders are 35 and platoon commanders are 25, a relatively worse nerf to the platoon commander, so in general I'd be more tempted to take more company commanders out of the two now. It might be starting to get a bit more crowded in the guard HQ slot now we're incentivized to take fewer detachments. Tempesta primers have gone up to 40 points, the command rod is still 5, and Lord Commissars, once you take into account their gear, have gone up from 35 points to 40. Bolt pistols are free now, but power swords have gone up from 4 points to 5. 14% increase, fairly in line with other things, though characters are a bit easier to target now. Regular Commissars have again copped more of a nerf proportionately, they've gone up 25% in cost, and they're still cheap, but I think the Lord Commissar is looking more attractive than he was. And on the Psyker side of things, Primaris Psykers have jumped from 46 to 50, so a relatively small increase proportionately, partially due to his stave now being folded into his base points cost. Again, your Astropaths are now free to take Telepathicus staves again, they don't cost any more points, which makes sense. They weren't exactly a massive combat boost in the first place, but they have gone up from 15 points to 25 points, one of the biggest proportional increases in the book, but to be honest I still think they're very worth taking. They were just ludicrously undercosted before. If you're looking to cast guard psychic powers, I think in general Astropaths are still the better option than Primaris Psykers. Basically, if you invest 50 points in Psykers, you get 2 casts for Astropaths, or only 1 cast for a Primaris Psyker. And while the Primaris has other advantages, I just think that being able to cast twice as much is better. In terms of characters from the elite slot now, again the trend seems to be going up 5 points per model. Of course, depending on how expensive the model was in the first place, this equates to relatively different percentage increases. I don't honestly think that these changes will really sway you too much as to whether or not you wanted to take these guys. In general, if you have a melee army, you're still going to be good taking Munitorum Priest, artillery is still going to be good with Master of Ordnance, and aircraft are still going to be decent with the Officer of the Fleet. A slight relative winner is the Ogrim Bodyguard, who with a Slab Shield and Bulgrim Maw and Bulgrim Plate has jumped up only 3 points, so if you were looking to protect characters, he's a relatively better deal than before. Could be particularly handy now the character targeting rules are a little bit more punishing, and our characters might be easier to gun down. Talking of characters, let's get on to our named infantry HQs. We will be covering Pask in the armoured video. The only one that's gone up out of proportion is Sergeant Harker, who's gone up 15 points. Most of the rest have gone up 5. Depending on just how many guns you can cluster around Harker for those reroll ones, is really still not a bad pick in my mind. It's a big proportionate increase, but not really going to make too much difference as to whether or not you take him, I think, due to their already higher points costs. Most of these guys don't really come through the change all that badly whatsoever. Maybe Kell is looking just a little bit less attractive than before relatively. Strachan's proportionately not increased all that much, so he's maybe even a better deal than some of the rest. The same goes for Yarrick, who's gone up from 100 to 105 points, so that will be a very tiny percentage increase, and gives him a relative buff compared with the field of other things in 40k that have gone up. Sorry for missing him off the list. If we turn our attention back to the elite section now, and go over the various other guard infantry units, in general there's quite a lot of positivity here. Bulgrins have seen a bit of a weird change. Their brute shields, the ones with the invul saves, now cost 5 points, and their slab shields are free. Honestly, slab shields I think were already the way to go for the majority of the unit, maybe with just a couple of the invul saves. In any case, our standard Bulgrin with slab shields and maul have only gone up 2% in points cost, due to their maul going down to 5 points. This means that they've had a relative buff compared with the average points increases of around about 10 to 15 points across the field, so Games Workshop have sort of made an already fairly good unit very slightly better, even if the cost of their psychic support has gone up a bit. Ogrins as well have seen a relative buff, they remain at 30 points, again with no increase when everything else is going up, that's a buff, so I'm glad Games Workshop has thrown them a bone. Command squads also remain at 6 points, so now cost the same amount as veterans, and again thanks to the drop in plasma and melter weapons, spamming these in command squads and special weapon squads has become a better idea than before. In particular, a quad melter company command squad would have cost you 80 points and now has dropped to just 64, so that's really quite a massive percentage decrease and just makes them a lot more viable point for point. Plasma spam here has also seen a drop. For the special weapons squads, they've gone up from 5 points from 4, so a slightly worse deal if you were using sniper rifles, quite a lot worse if you're using grenade launchers that are now 5 points, but a 3 plasma special weapons squad will cost you the same as before, so a relative buff, and as with everywhere, the melter guns have dropped, meaning that now for only 45 points you can field 3 melter guns in your gun line. I think that we will be seeing a few more of these special weapon toting damage dealers. Some of the rest of the elite spots seem to have really changed almost at random though, to be honest. Crusaders have jumped from 13 points to 20, once you take into account their war gear. Honestly not at all sure what they were thinking there. They weren't amazing before, and they're very much worse now. Silent command squads with hotshot lasguns have increased a fairly standard amount at plus 11%, but arguably a better deal than they were previously if you were spamming special weapons, either quad plasma, quad melter, and quad hotshot lasguns. Again, quad melter squads being particularly buffed. Both Ratlings and Servitors have been hit very heavily, increasing it by over 40% in cost, and it means that Cadian command squads are winning again in terms of damage dealing, in terms of sniper damage output. Veteran squads have jumped from 5 to 6, so a slightly high increase if you're including just lasguns, but with special weapon changes again, certain loadouts will be slightly better. It's not quite as bad if you're looking at things like triple melter guns, for example. Wordvane Psychers have gone up a point. Fairly standard buff there, no better or worse than anything else. Maybe a bit of a missed opportunity to give a bad unit a buff though. And finally for heavy weapon squads in the heavy support section, they've gone up from 6 points to 7 as per the base team, but overall this means that they haven't really received much of a points increase when they're using las cannons or auto cannons, so despite a small increase, a relative buff when using those weapons. Missile launcher teams are just really loads more expensive now, and I'm not sure that the blast draw makes up for it. Mortars have risen a fairly standard amount, so I think they might be very slightly better than before, as they'll actually be wanting to use their blast profile as much of the time as possible. Managed to miss them off here, but heavy bolters went up to 50 points from 42, and that one's a 19% increase. Again, I can't really see any good reason to run them at the moment. So overall, on the foot guard side of things, a bit of a mixed bag. More expensive infantry squads will hurt, conscripts are a bit useless, and hotshot lasgun spamming scions have definitely been hit as well. However, more damage dealing infantry squads with things like plasma guns and melter guns have come out relatively better than their lasgun counterparts, so I think we could be expecting to see a few more of those in the game. Then the elite slot, command squads and special weapon squads and Bulgarin all seem like big winners. Ratlings and Crusaders have been hit very hard by a nerf, and the majority of special characters are relatively unchanged. The Astra has been hit a bit, but it's still a good buy. Please let me know your thoughts on the changes down in the comments below, then feel free to point out any mistakes or errors I've made in the video. There were quite a lot of numbers to crunch with this one. I'll certainly be back to cover guard armour tomorrow. We'll be looking at Lehman Russes and all of their other vehicles, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that. If you have found this breakdown useful and would like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, and you can find it down in the video description below. Making all of these videos does take a fair amount of time, so if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is greatly appreciated. Channel Patreons get to see videos early each week, there's regular polls to see what sort of things you want to see next on the channel, and you get automatically entered into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway each month. So if any of that interests you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a big thank you for listening, and I'm certainly looking forward to making more guard videos throughout 9th edition.